Great. Welcome to another roundtable session. We're excited to host another topic with two of our mentors who've been on previous panels. Today's topic is all about thriving through change. So we've all been through a lot of change in the last year and a half. We've actually hosted this topic before and it's very popular. So today we have another set of mentors who will share their stories on how they've navigated change throughout, personal and professional differences in what's been going on with their lives. So really excited to hear those stories. This is an opportunity for everybody to kind of share different aspects of turbulent times in their lives. So I want to say that this is a roundtable session, so if you are here and want to provide any perspective or comments or questions for the panel, feel free to raise your hand and we can unmute you, or you can leave your comment in chat and we'll address it. So with that, I'll go ahead and pass it over to Randy, who's our guest moderator, to introduce himself, and then I will pass it over to the mentor panelists. Thank you all for joining today.
Well, hello, everyone. Thank you, Kunal. My name is Randy Emelo, and I'm the Chief Strategist here at Mentor Spaces, and I get to work with our customers and with our community to engage in the practice of mentoring. And here at Mentor Spaces, mentoring is essentially a conversation or a series of conversations with people in the know. And today we have two excellent panelists who are returning. They've already done sessions with us in the past, and kind of veterans is called that way. And in a moment, I'm going to have them introduce themselves. Now, for those of you who are listening in, or those of you who are attending in the audience, know that at the end of this session, if one of the mentors or gave some particular advice or shared some life experience that is relevant or particularly germane for the situation you're currently facing, feel free to reach out to us either in the chat channel here or within the app, within the concierge channel, and we'll look to see if one of the mentors is available to meet and have a conversation with you. And with that said, man, is this topic appropriate or what? Change. We'll get into telling our change stories in a few moments. Change is synonymous with pain. And as a colleague of mine once said, the only thing that we like to change is the baby's diaper, right? Everything else is a bit of a struggle to think about. And so we're going to get into this today. Let's start over here with Charisse. Can you take a few moments and introduce yourself?
Sure. Thank you, Randy. My name is Charisse Colbert, and I work with Western Governors University. I've been working in higher ed for about 15 years now, a little over 15 years. And I am currently a project manager, and I've always dealt in the project management space in my career. I am also a wife and a mom, and currently serving as a taxi to two teenagers. And I look forward to chatting with you all.
So you're not changing diapers anymore?
No, not changing diapers. We're changing tires sometimes.
Very good. Thank you, Charisse. Matt?
Hey, thanks, Randy. I'm Matt Hamilton. I'm the Senior Director of Sales Engineering, which is a really long title for a guy that just is a jack of all trades. For a company called Casepoint, we're a software technology company specific to litigation. And my background's been in sales and technology, and even worked for law firms and kind of a variety of different backgrounds and experiences. I'm a husband and two kids, but mine are past the diapers and the taxi time. One's about to get married within the year, and the other one's finishing up the last year of college. So a little bit later in the seasons of life.
Well, great. Certainly you guys have experienced a lot of change probably in your life and in your career. Today we're going to be associating the topic obviously to life circumstances, because I think it all factors in, whether you're making a change and pivoting your career, or you're facing a difficult decision where you have to make that decision whether you're going to enter into a period of change volitionally, meaning you get to choose it, or you get to deal with that kind of change that none of us likes to deal with, and that's imposed change. And just as an example, my youngest son, who's 25, will be 26 here in just a couple weeks, just got laid off this last week. And good news is he already has 2 job offers, but sometimes change happens to us and we have to respond to it. Sometimes we get to orchestrate or manage entering, when we're going to pick the time and pick our poison, when we're going to enter into it. So just by background, can you describe, we'll have our panelists here both, describe one of the most significant kinds of change that you personally kind of navigated through or you've experienced? And why don't we just stick with the order that we have and start with Charisse, and we just are looking forward to hearing your experience.
Sure. So my change story is a change that I actually orchestrated and initiated, and it was my divorce, essentially. And it was a very, very tough decision. And I knew that my life would change because I was married for 7 years in my first marriage, and it was someone who I'd known for over 20 years. And so going through the divorce and initiating it, I knew to anticipate the change. However, one thing I didn't realize is the impact the change would have on me emotionally, physically. I didn't see that coming. And so I had to work really hard to make sure that I was in a good place as best as I could be, because I also still had to take care of my children and work. And so that was a pretty significant change, even beyond death of loved ones. I haven't had a loved one pass away that's close to me yet. That's, my divorce is probably the most significant change I've been through. That was the most impactful, and I actually initiated it.
Great, thank you, Charisse, for sharing that. I mean, it's and I'm glad that we're getting real right away, because it's not always pleasant, but hopefully we'll talk about how do we manage our way through it. And that's certainly a circumstance that is pretty devastating all the way around. As you said, that the impact is holistic. And let's go over to Matt. What was one of the more significant change events that you've had?
There's been a lot. I think anybody has a lot. Probably the most notable, and they say if you're married, there's a few things that are going to be the test your marriage. One of them is change in job, a death in the family, or having a kid, and then moving. Those are kind of the 4 big ones. After our son was born, about 2 years later, or about a year and a half later, my wife came to me one day, came home from work, and she said, "Hey, I'm pregnant, we're moving." Like all in one sentence. So it took me a second to catch both of them, mainly because we needed a different place with another kid. So we had arranged to move in with my grandmother just while we were waiting on the other house to get ready, our new place. Well, she passes away 2 weeks before we're supposed to move in with her. So that kind of put some extra tension on it. And then our house was delayed being ready by 2 weeks. So our daughter was supposed to be here. We were supposed to be moved in before our daughter came. And in the midst of all that, I decided to change jobs. So right in the middle of all that, we had every one of them at the same time. So a lot of change kind of bouncing in several different places.
Yeah, it's terrible when you get kind of a cluster change attack. But I've weathered a few of those myself. Let's talk a little bit about, what were some of the difficult decisions that you faced during that change? And maybe a little bit around, weighing it out. What was the give? What was the get through the change for you? Charisse?
That's a good question. Oftentimes during my divorce proceedings, I felt like I had to constantly decide between work and my kids at first, because I wasn't focused on what was important. I felt like I was a little bit in the haze. But then I realized really quickly, especially when my son's teacher started writing notes home that he was misbehaving in class, that I had to refocus my priorities. And so I focused more so on my sons and got appropriate resources for us. But, it took a few wake up calls to get to that point. And to say that we're not damaged from that is, being unrealistic. We're still dealing with some of the aftermath of that, even 5 years later. So those are some of the, decisions I had to make and changes, pivots we had to do during the change.
Thank you so much. Matt?
Because ours was a mix of intentional and non-intentional. And I think fortunately in my situation, my wife and I are kind of like-minded in that, change is inevitable and it's just going to happen in your life. So, from day to day, it changes. Like I live in the Dallas area. Yesterday it was 100 degrees. Today it's 82. Change happens. Where we have our fear, I think, is about the unknown from that change. So, everybody embraces change to some degree. Now, the unintentionals, not so much. Like having a grandmother die right before we're supposed to move in with her, that was not an unpleasant change experience for us. But the other ones were things that we intentionally went through. We balanced it on a couple of things. One, we do have mentors we talk to, friends that we can trust in, to just lean on. Even if it's not true mentorship, it's just a friend to go, just letting you know I'm stressed right now, or what do you think about this, or I just want to vocalize what's going on. Outside of just our marriage, we do that as well inside, but when you're both inside the storm, it's kind of hard to see outside the storm. And that we rely on our faith a lot. That has a big portion of what we do, so that's part of who we are. And then just realizing that tomorrow's another day. What looks bad today is not near as vibrant tomorrow, or it's better tomorrow. It may be more clear tomorrow. It's amazing what a night's sleep can do for you when you're trying to tackle a challenge. Sometimes it's a week's worth of sleep, but sometimes it's just one night.
Yeah, thank you so much, Matt, for that. We're going to talk a little bit, maybe shift a little bit to, for you personally, when you think back and you were in the throes of that change, what was happening for you in your thought life? What was happening for you emotionally? And I know, Matt, you just kind of alluded to a little bit of it. What I'm taking from your story is, it's a bit of an emotional roller coaster. And if you're anything like me, I know that personally, right now, I'll share with you, I'm in the middle of a change. We sold our house. We bought a new build. COVID's happening. The new build is delayed. My wife and I are now living in a hotel for the next 6 to 8 weeks, and it's interesting. I can tell you that it's hard for me to quiet myself, my thoughts in the evening to get good sleep. It's emotionally taxing on me. It's like there's this low-level anxiety that ripples, through me constantly. And there are ways that I manage that. Before I learned, and that's probably one of the biggest lessons I personally learned from change, is that change will either manage you or you have to manage it. And I've learned some tips, tools, and techniques, and we're going to get to that in just a moment about, but let's talk a little bit about the thought and the emotional life that happens in the midst of change. What happens for you personally, Charisse?
Well, even outside of my divorce, when change happens, for me personally, I do have a bit of anxiety around it because of the unknown, especially when it's unplanned change. I've learned to handle it in a more healthy way than I did initially when I was younger. Most of that I learned through my divorce proceedings. When I initially got to file for divorce, I thought it was going to be a lot easier than it was, and then I, experienced an emotional trauma just realizing all the changes that were coming, because they were already happening. Like my children were asking questions. I had to go through different steps to change my name, relocate, move. just a lot of different changes. We had mutual friends. And so all that was coming all at one time. And I also had to take care of my 2 young sons. And at the time they were toddlers. And so I just happened to have a doctor's appointment at the time. And I was talking to my doctor about it. And he said, it's okay to take care of yourself and make time for yourself during this time. And I told him I thought I was, and he said that I wasn't in a good state. And so at that point, even though usually it's a stigma around it, I did make a decision to take some medication to help me through that period, knowing that it was temporary. I was able to take care of my children and still work because I needed the income and make it through the change essentially. However, since then, not to say that using medication is not good. It's not necessarily a long-term solution for me. For anyone else, it might be, depending on their situation. But since then, I've learned to use other ways physically to help my body handle the change, which I've learned is a lot of us handling the change is stress. But I remember, like just being in a haze. There's a lot of stuff that happened that I don't remember because, in my mind, I'm intentionally blocking it out because I don't want to remember because it was a bad time. And then also my network, my community, my family, reaching out to me a lot because they knew that I'm the type of person, if I need help, I wouldn't necessarily raise my hand that quick to ask for it. So they were more reaching out to me more than ever and volunteering to help and support. And so that was my mental state during the change. And, that was a big change. With little changes, it's not as taxing, considering the change, especially when it comes to stuff at work.
Great. Thank you so much, Charisse. Matt, thoughts, emotions?
Yeah, I mean, some of it's stereotypical for a guy behavior. When change is happening, we want to try to control wherever we can. I mean, I'm not saying all men are like that, but that's an inherent ability in a lot of us that we just try to control, or throw the stiff upper lip and say, no problem, we've got this. And I spent a stint in the military as well, in the Army, and one of our deals was you never know what's going to happen, and it's improvise, adapt, and overcome. That's more of a value than any other value they tell you that's out there, because it's always change. And you kind of have to take a little bit of that with it. But I think, Charisse, you said phenomenally, is there's no embarrassment in knowing that you're a little overwhelmed or even massively overwhelmed. If it feels like a tsunami's hit you, it's okay. Go get help. It's okay to cry. It's okay to seek therapy. It's okay to get medication where it's appropriate under a doctor's advice. Just don't do it yourself. But those are not anything to be ashamed of, because what seems easy to me may be overwhelming to someone else, and what's overwhelming to me may be easy to somebody else. It just depends on how we're wired. So there's no shame in that, and knowing that part of change is failure. You're gonna mess up. It's gonna turn out the wrong way. You're gonna have scars. They may be good reminder scars. They may be painful scars that take a while to heal. And then a lot of them are just really good things. Like change of having a baby was, in our instance, was phenomenal. For other people, that's a really, really stressful situation that maybe wasn't expected. So, it's just your perception on where you are, but dealing with it with the tools and support and people, and not being afraid to go out and ask for help.
Yeah, I think that, Matt, you brought up an interesting point there when you say it's just our perspective. I do think that one of the biggest life lessons that I've taken away through the changes in my life has been exactly that most of the time, if I can change my mindset, the unacceptable becomes acceptable, and the intolerable becomes tolerable, and the devastating, all of a sudden I start seeing opportunity that is in the midst of it, or I see some kind of, as humans, we are meaning-making machines, so you're going to make meaning of it. My encouragement to anyone going through change right now is that you have a lot more control than you probably think you do over how you're processing what's happening. And I do think that that is, for me, as already alluded to by some of your shares on our call today, has been that's where reaching out to others. And as I said at the top of our call, to me, mentorship is simply having a conversation with someone in the know. And a lot of times, for me personally, that's where I gain the most perspective. Like I get stuck. I get stuck in the middle of my own personal, negative thoughts, or, I have tendencies to catastrophize things that I don't orchestrate. And therefore that's the worst thing in the world for me. And honestly, looking back at change in my life, what initiated it had very little to do with what the end result was. Meaning that the worst thing in the world that happened to me ended up being one of the biggest blessings. And that's kind of a reoccurring theme in my life. And what I've realized is that it really is an issue of perspective. And a lot of times for me, I need to connect with others in a significant way. And by that meaning sharing my thoughts, my crazy thoughts, sharing my out of control emotions, my anxiety, my fears, false evidence appearing real that is happening in the moment, and with someone else who can maybe lend a different perspective. And then ultimately, again, as I said, for me, it's all about, I have to be able to fight for clarity of thought, because one of the things that happens in my thought life in the midst of change is it becomes very hard to focus. And then the things that my mind does want to fixate on are things that are typically not real healthy for me. So those are all, kind of know yourself and know what your patterns are. And then my encouragement is always connect with others to leverage your way out of being stuck in the moment. I'll tell you, as my youngest son, he's one of those kids who he doesn't call all the time. I don't always know what's going on with him. I know he's usually okay because he's a really responsible kid, not like some of others. But when he started connecting with me around his concerns that his work was beginning to become erratic, I was able to just listen, just be there and listen. And you know this if you have children at a certain age, they really don't, the talking to is not what they're looking for. And, they don't want advice, which I'm full of. But just listening a lot of times is really, really helpful for others when they're going through change. So with some of that, and for you, what makes change difficult for you? Let's maybe throw that out there. Charisse?
For me, personally, what makes change difficult is I'm a planner. I like to, what I'm doing, I have my schedule set. I'm a taxi mom right now, soccer mom. And so we have practice schedules, doctor's appointments and stuff. And so when something pops up that's unexpected, it's irritating. I get a feeling of irritation essentially. What I've learned to do is, what I'm learning to do and practicing, I should say, and getting better at is pausing, because I realize that it's not healthy for me mentally and physically. And my sons are usually around me, and they're gonna mirror what behaviors I have, and I want them to have healthy behaviors when they react to change, especially when it's unexpected. So just pausing and realizing that it's really not that big of a deal. Like you said, it's all about perspective. And then essentially, the same experience happens with me in the end. There's usually a lesson learned, or I realize that it's a change the size of a pea, and there's other mountains that we have to, allocate our energy to conquer. So that's how we handle it.
Good, thanks. Matt, any thoughts, any advice?
I'll take a note from the same book as Charisse, that it's pausing. That's the biggest thing is, if you're like I said, if you're in the thicket, it's hard to pause because it feels weird, or you've got your plan. I have a little bit of that same OCD kind of tendency of everything has to be in order, and we try to plan and calendar everything. And then when something gets thrown in there, it's like, okay, now I got to mentally do all the math to readjust everything real quick without getting stressed or chewing somebody up. On the flip side of it, and Randy, I hope you don't mind, I would change his thought. We've talked a lot about negative change, but one of the other things on the positive changes is being ashamed to share that with people. Sometimes there's the same hesitancy that we have on the negative side to go, I don't want to show them my warts, so to speak, because something's bad. I need that help. But when something positive happens, we sometimes are also hesitant to go tell somebody, hey, look what good is happening to me, or look what I'm excited about. Can you be excited with me? Because it'll make me, make it feel better. So that's the other side of it too. The challenge of, when positive things happen is still reaching out and going, hey, my support group, you were there when I was needing a shoulder to cry on. Can you pat me on the back now too? Because I want you to be happy with me, and I don't always want to go to the well with negative. So I think it's kind of a blend of both of, pausing to appreciate where you are and pausing to appreciate where you don't want to be, but you want to be somewhere else. So it's kind of a blend of both.
That's a good point, Matt. It reminded me of something I wanted to share is like, there was a time when I changed positions and I was really excited about it. That's a good change. You get a promotion. And I didn't share it with my friends. And also I felt that I couldn't ask for help when I needed it, being new in the position. So there's, that feeling of embarrassment, shame for some reason. I know that there's a reason, but pinpointing at the time I couldn't. And then also just, trying to balance everything else that's going on. But good change is, something we should also be talking about.
Yeah, that's great. And I know that we have to wrap this conversation up. I really appreciate both of you sharing your lived experience. I always hesitate to call change good or bad, just simply because those things, as I mentioned, those things that I have thought were quote unquote bad, what they were they just didn't line up with my current expectations in the moment as to what should be happening. But that's not how life is. Maybe that's how we started this conversation, and Matt kind of kicking us off with that thought that, change is not necessarily good or bad. It just is, and it's pretty constant and consistent throughout our life. And sometimes it happens in clusters. Sometimes we get to orchestrate it and we get to manage it, and other times it's just happening. And we have to, I think, continue to think about how we can thrive in the midst of it. I really appreciate our panelists today. I'm going to turn it over to Kunal to take us out. But if anyone would like to connect with either Matt or Charisse, and if you're in the middle of change and you want a little support or guidance or help, feel free to reach out to us in the concierge channel in the app as well, and we will have a chat with you and see if we can't get you connected to somebody who will be a willing listening ear and help provide some listening, if not guidance and support. So with that, thank you very much. Kunal, do you want to pick it up and take us out?
Yeah, thank you, Randy. Really appreciate all the authentic comments here that were made around change that all three of you have experienced. Really insightful, and definitely understand the tough times that you've been through. I've also experienced those as well, and really just hearing your thought process was great. I wanted to, Randy mentioned that you can connect with one of the mentors here or any mentor spaces by reaching out to us in the concierge channel. So feel free to raise your hand there if you want to connect one-on-one with the mentors, get support for a career goal or a change, or any sort of advice that you need as it relates to your professional development. The last thing I'll say before I end this is that we have another roundtable session that's scheduled for Thursday at 4 p.m. Eastern Time. 6 p.m. Eastern Time. Please join us for that session is all about how to present your ideas. So if you're looking to get buy-in from others, whether it's at work or whether it's with any friends or colleagues that you're around, feel free to join that session to see how mentors have positioned their ideas in front of folks that they're trying to get buy-in from. So look forward to hosting that session. With that, we'll go ahead and close this out. Thank you for joining the conversation today. Bye, everyone.
Thank you.